Well, the Knights spent 3 weeks in the top 8 this season, but one of them was in the final round as they started to hit their straps late. So, are they back on track, or is there still work to do? Let's find out. It's the 2024 season review for the Newcastle Knights. And here to break this down for me, as always, zero tackle expert analyst Darren Parkin. Darren, massive offensive drop-off for the Knights this year.
Yeah, had the biggest points differential change season to season of any side in the competition, a 215-point swing, which is extraordinary. They were ranked third in attack last year, 16th in attack this year. So from a top 4 offensive side to the second worst in the competition. They scored 121 tries last year, down to 83 this year. So again, that's 3rd to 15th. And easily the lowest scoring of the finalists, and by quite some margin as well. They were ranked better defensively than the Cowboys and Manly, and still top 6 in defence, having been top 4 in both of those spaces last season. So, quite extraordinary in terms of the numbers drop away. But in saying that, they were still pretty competitive right at the end. They squeaked into finals after they beat the Dolphins in the final round, and then they led that final 12-4 against the Cowboys before getting knocked out. They had a couple of half chances at 16 all to win that game and push into a semi. And obviously the one thing that hangs over their head all the time is the one-man band tag, which is always a little bit harsh, but they're not necessarily doing a lot to shake that off at this point, but that's one of the keys for them.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, pretty interesting one. So let's get through to the 2024 pass mark. All right. So as we mentioned, they finished 5th last year. This year, coming into 2024, they should have been top 4.
They should have been. I mean, very quickly that changed. Obviously, with the early running of the season, they were 2-5. And then obviously they had to win their last 3 and 4 of their last 5 in order to play finals. And I reckon by doing that, they redeemed themselves. They then equipped themselves pretty well in the first week of the finals. So they kind of saved their season, and I reckon they walked out of it feeling that they probably get a pass mark given the challenges they faced. They'd be a little bit flat, but I think they could probably look at it and go, look, the season was heading in one direction. We pulled it back. We made ourselves dangerous again. We kept having a crack. We were defensively good. And, in the end, we probably saved ourselves from a lot of damage.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, let's dive a bit further. Take a look at the lowlights for 2024. All right, so probably let's start in terms of lowlights. They just couldn't get the mix right. 11 different halves combinations.
Yeah, it's extraordinary in 25 matches. So almost every second week or thereabouts, they were mixing that up. Their first choice options were Tyson Gamble, Jackson Hastings. They got injuries at times and also fell out of favour during the season. So you ended up with Phoenix Crossland at number 7, Jack Hogger at number 6 at the end of the season. But that's probably not a long-term fix. They're good, solid options for them, but in terms of challenging for a flag, they still need to solve that problem ultimately. And it meant they got no stability really in terms of combining with Ponga and getting some flow into what they're doing. And one of the issues they'll face in trying to fix that is their salary cap issues. That's been well documented all year. There was talk around that. They could lose players like Adam Elliott and the like. They lose David Armstrong to the Super League. That wasn't ideal with that happening as well over the course of the early part of the season. So yeah, it's there are some challenges for them, but they desperately need some stability.
Yep. Absolutely. All right, let's flip over to the positive and the highlights. Right, so the Knights this year, they recovered a few times within the season, just kept fighting, really.
Yeah, I think the spirit was one. They didn't throw it in. I mean, as we said, they were 2-5. They had to win 4 of their last 5 to play finals, and that's when they played their best football of the year. So I think they kept battling away, which would have pleased them a little bit. So during that late season surge, we talk about how scoring was an issue for them. They scored 86 points in 3 weeks with wins over the Bunnies, the Dolphins and the Titans, and that would have shown their fans how dangerous they can be if they get the ball forward. They just didn't get it forward often enough to cause that damage. I still think that firepower is there if they can get themselves into a more attacking position more often. Then you look at, say, Bradman Best and Dane Gagai, who we'll mention a bit more as well. They were as dangerous as any centre combination in the league, scored 15 tries between them, a stack of line breaks as well. So I'd say the highlight for them would be that they were at their best and up and humming at the end of the season, which is better than the alternative.
Yeah, absolutely. They put themselves in some tricky positions, but it's always good to win when it matters. All right, looking now to a standout player. All right, so we're actually highlighting two standout players for the Knights this year, Kalen Ponga and Dane Gagai.
Yeah, I mean, Kalen Ponga, all class. We spoke about the one-man band tag. They get that a lot with him, acceleration, ability to pick holes in the defence, and he was the one at 16 all in that final against the Cowboys that just had a couple of half chances that were missed, and I know he'd be ruining those opportunities, but so much sits on his shoulders. Incredibly watchable player. 16 games, so obviously they'd love to squeeze the full complement of matches out of him, and Gagai winding back the clock, 33 years of age, probably his best season or very close to. 8 tries, 16 line breaks, 6 try assists, averaged 147 running metres per game, and won the Danny Baderas medal at the Knights' end of season function. So yeah, a couple of those guys at, I guess, different ages of the spectrum were pivotal for them.
And if there's one thing that we know here at Zero Tackle, it's headlines. And let's start with Kalen Ponga opting out of Australian selection in the middle of the year to focus on the Knights.
Yeah, and the NRL have rules in place that I guess unless you are unavailable due to injury or suspension or whatever it may be, then, I guess you're expected to make yourself available for the national side. And Kalen Ponga opting out of playing for Australia in the middle of the year, and he made it clear the reasons why. He wanted to focus on the Knights and having success, and they were struggling at that point, so he wanted to lead them back to competitiveness. But the fact that he wasn't injured breached the NRL rules on eligibility. They were given a please explain and an ultimatum on effectively changing their stance. So that created a little bit of headlines. I mean, noble from him on one hand, but you can understand the angst around it. And we've mentioned their salary cap squeeze. It did look a chance earlier in the year that it might claim him. I think there was an alleged meeting between his father and the Sydney Roosters at various stages that got a bit of attention. So, and then just a couple of little on-field things. Their controversial loss to the Sharks late in the year, where you've hardly seen more bad decisions in the latter stages of a game, and that led to some confrontation between O'Brien and the league on how that all went down. Yeah,
there was definitely a high traffic week that week at Zero Tackle. So let's look ahead now to 2025 and the pass mark. All right, so if you're a Knights fan heading into 2025, where do we see the pass mark? They just need to settle on a spine, essentially.
Basically, yeah, and just, I think, settle and be consistent is the key for them. So settle on a spine, find another playmaker who can take some pressure off Kalen Ponga and give them a few more weapons. Fletcher Sharp's good. They bring in James Schiller, that'll help them. But they've got to settle into a consistent halves pairing. They cannot build any type of cohesion to be a top four side at present with the chopping and changing. I think they've got the right staff. Their recruiting's pretty good. Salary cap limitations is going to make that job hard, but I think they'll be all right. I think finals rather than contention, but it wouldn't absolutely stun me if they put themselves in the mix to go into the last four in the season.
Yep, absolutely. Well, that wraps it up for the Newcastle Knights season review. A very curious side, Darren.
Yeah, they are. They're always a hard side to look away from. So, the ones I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do.
Yep, absolutely. So, let us know in the comments if you think the Knights can push back into the top four in 2025. Remember to like and subscribe. We'll be doing season reviews for every team in the NRL, and we'll also be looking ahead to 2026 and who your team should be targeting in that contract signing window. So, thank you, Darren, and catch all the latest NRL news at zerotackle.com.